My next speaker, who I am very much looking forward to introducing you to, is Caroline Kennedy. Caroline Kennedy is passionate about the media industry with 25 years of experience and has founded the Kennedy PR Plus brand in 1992. I'm delighted to hand you over to Caroline for her to speak with us here today.
Thank you very much. It's a strange experience talking to a group of students by Zoom. I hope you can all see and hear me correctly right now. And I was delighted to be invited to speak today, not least because last year I worked with the Undergraduate Awards programme, and it gave me a fantastic insight into how exciting the programme is and just the sheer level of talent, enthusiasm and passion that I met from all of the students I met last year. So I suppose I should start by congratulating everybody today on getting to this point where you're engaged and visible with the programme. I just want to tell you a little bit about myself, and I know I've got a short period to speak and I do want to share some insights obviously, but as mentioned, I started my own business in '92. It was out of necessity. It wasn't a desire to be an entrepreneur, but Ireland and Dublin in particular at that time was in a deep recession and I found it almost impossible to get work. So necessity is the mother of invention. And I had a background in the media. I'd worked in radio, I'd worked in TV, and I had experience of working within the PR industry. So that's actually how it happened. I won't age myself by telling you when I started, I had a telephone line and just about had a fax machine. So they were the communication tools, and a typewriter, not even a PC. They were the communications tools at my disposal at the time. Since then, I've had the privilege and the pleasure of working with some amazing brands, international brand names that you would recognize, I think, from Tiffany, Chanel, Christian Dior, Hermes, Mercedes, Jaguar, Land Rover, a number of well-known hotels in Ireland, and other brands like Nespresso. And I use the word brand because all businesses really are a brand today. And I think it's probably important to stress that whilst I'm saying I started my business with a telephone line and a typewriter, you'll be starting into your careers with a lot of extra tools that you can use, not least your own personal brand. And when I was thinking about what I'd like to say today, the thing that occurred to me the most was each and every one of you probably has a profile on social media. I'm sure you're on LinkedIn, and it means you're already ahead of the posse before you enter the workforce in terms of defining your own brand. You're about to enter the workforce with, your brand already has started to be defined. And by brand, what I really mean is your personal brand. And that's not to make you sound like a commodity or a product, but I think everybody has to realize that they do have their own personal brand. And what you'd have to start thinking now about is, what are the aspects to successful branding that other businesses have enjoyed, that you can understand the insights that combine to make a successful brand. So I just was making a note here of what I think they are. I think the most important thing to any successful brand is to be genuine and authentic. And I say that simply because when you enter the workforce and you're going for a job interview, for sure, the person who's in front of you has a lot more experience in terms of the interviewing techniques that you might be deploying, and you'll be spotted a mile away if you're not being yourself, if you're not being authentic, and if you're not being genuine. You can't fake passion. Generally, I would advise you to be, upfront and honest and transparent when you're explaining what your background is and your interest in a particular role. So as I say, I'm underscoring here to be genuine and authentic. The other thing that, and again, this might sound a little bit hackneyed, but it's so important to tell your own story. And by that, I mean, every successful brand in the world has a story to tell, whether it's an old brand, whether it's a new brand, but everybody has to start at some point, the beginning. So just even in terms of, refining your own story, making sure that, you're creating a niche for yourself, you're underscoring all the things that make you different to your competitors or the people that might be going into the workplace alongside with you. So just make sure that you know what your own story is. Your story certainly can begin with the fact that you were chosen amongst all your peers for being excellent and outstanding and being selected onto the program, the Undergraduate Awards program. That in itself is a brilliant way to start a story. It would make you stand out in a crowd for sure. Another great insight, be consistent. And by that, I mean, more than likely in the workplace, being consistent is making sure that there's always a sense of gravitas about what it is that you're doing. Of course, you can be lighthearted and tell funny stories in the workplace and all the rest, but at the end of the day, how you present your brand should always be professional and should always have, as I say, a layer of gravitas really that shows how interested and passionate you are in your job and how serious you are about succeeding. Um, all great brands have failed. There's no such thing as a perfect story where no mistakes haven't been made along the way. So I would say to you, be prepared to fail. And very often, a fail or failure can be a gift because it shows you how to improve things, make things better, make sure they don't happen again. And it also makes you resilient. It's desperately disappointing when you make a mistake, and nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I can't wait to make a mistake today. But just learning how to fail well and do better and make sure it doesn't happen again, that's really important. And as I say, there's no brand that can't tell you the mistakes they made, the markets they went into that they shouldn't have gone into, the ad campaigns that failed, and none of these failures came from a place of, carelessness. They would have been carefully thought through. So as I say, just be prepared to fail. I should just say there, what I've definitely learned over the years that if a mistake is made, the most important thing you can do is fess up, put your hands up and be honest and take the problem straight to the person who can help you fix it. There's nothing worse in the workplace than somebody trying to conceal a mistake they've made or cover up some embarrassment. You'll gain respect from your peers, you'll gain respect from, your managers. They're the people that'll want to know how they can help you fix it. So as I say, I think it's really important to be honest. Another insight I think is, if you think about your personal brand and how you make a personal impact, that'll probably more or less revolve around the fact that people like working with you. So, or they like your personal brand, whatever that might be. But I just think it's so important to remember, there's no solo runs in any organization. It's so important to be liked by your team. I love the line always, and I repeat it often, people like doing business with people that they like. So just don't ignore the fact that you've got to make an effort to get on with people. You've got to learn as you go along how to be a team player. But as I say, every great brand that was ever invented, be that, as I say, an espresso or Louis Vuitton handbag, there are teams of people that are behind building that brand and bringing that brand to market and making sure that it is a success. Another thing that's really important about branding is it's not something that's static. You've got to live your brand. So in your case, whether it's online, whether it's about how you engage with other people within the workforce or outside of the workforce, make sure you're true to your own brand so that you're constantly thinking about what are the things that get you excited, what are the insights that you can share, what is your niche, in other words, that you can share with people. So I suppose it's just another thing I should just say there about your brand, it's not always about just doing what is being asked of you in the workplace. It's not just always about, ticking boxes and, doing the tasks you've been asked. There's other aspects to your brand in the workplace that are important. Share any stories you have about volunteering, any activism you might be involved in, giving back, in other words. And also, you will be exceptional, I'm sure, in whatever careers you choose. Think back, are there any students behind you and along the way that you would be able to help? So that just is a much more rounded way of looking at your brand, as opposed to it just being, perfunctory or something that's transactional. The other thing I would say to you is, be mindful about how other people tell your story. In other words, what is your reputation? When you go in for an interview, for example, have a little think, what would you like those people to be saying about you when you've left the room? What is it going to be about your story or your brand that they're going to remember? You want people to remember you for being yourself, obviously, but also for things that are unique. So really hone that question before you go for interview. What do you want them to say about you when you've left the room? I just think that's really important because that's your reputation. And when it comes to reputation, there's no successful brand I know anyway that wouldn't fight tooth and nail to have the reputation kept intact, refined. If somebody's saying something that's not correct, if there's misinformation, if a competitor is trying to undermine you, there's no successful brand that won't go and fix that and make sure that there's nothing out there in the ether that's incorrect about your brand. And I suppose lastly, what I say to you is every great brand leaves a legacy. And by legacy, I mean, when zoom forward, fast forward maybe 20, 30 years, 40 years, when you're, at the end of your career, have a little think about what your legacy is going to be. And by that, I mean, think back on all the great things that you've done and think back on all the great people who've helped you get to where you are. There's a great entrepreneur, business writer, academic who I read regularly in the Financial Times called Margaret Heffernan, Dr. Margaret Heffernan. And I remember a great article one time that she wrote saying that when she's interviewing people for a job or a new position or a consultancy, she'll always ask them very early in the interview, tell me all the people that helped you along the way and how they helped you. And if that person can't come back with an answer spontaneously, transparently, honestly to explain who were the people that helped them along their way, she won't give them the job because she doesn't believe that person will ever be a team player and will always be thinking about their own needs, basically. So I just love that line of, leave a legacy. Have a little think about what would you like to be able to say about your own career, your own personal brand in 40 years' time, in 50 years' time. What do you want your grandchildren to know about your time in the workplace? Because I think if you ponder on any of those thoughts, all of those to me are the keys to the success of any great brand. So I wish you all the very best of luck in your careers. I hope you all enjoy developing your own brand, whether it's on LinkedIn or in other social platforms. And lastly, just want to congratulate you. You've got a great story ahead to tell, and I wish you the best of luck with your career.
Hi, Caroline. Thank you very much. We have a quick question if you have the time. Caroline and a few of the people were very interested by the point you made about failure. So Caroline asks, what failures of yours have you learned from?
What failures have I learned from? I once didn't, actually, this is the biggest failure because it cost me money. So it was an expensive mistake. I didn't go with my gut when I knew that a member of my team was introducing a celebrity. I won't go through names or anything like that, but a well-known celebrity was being brought into Ireland to endorse a consumer product, which was a product that is probably in every household in Ireland. And I just knew from the profile of the person that she, as it happens, might not be a reliable fit. But my colleague assured me it was what the client wanted. It was all going to be perfect. And I deferred to my colleague and I deferred to my client as opposed to my gut. Anyway, the person came to do the launch, but wasn't able to fulfill the contract. In other words, didn't do what she was meant to do. And I was so embarrassed by the whole thing that I hadn't, pushed through and said, this is wrong. I told the client, don't worry, I'll look after this. And I'd say, now this is a good 15 years ago, and I would say I was left with a legal bill inviting the agent, saying to them that their client, the celebrity, hadn't delivered. I lost the case and it probably cost me about, in legal fees, 40,000 English pounds at the time, sterling. And that was the biggest financial mistake I made in terms of a cost. And it was because I didn't trust my gut. And that's the one that springs to mind when asked that question.
Brilliant. Thank you, Caroline. And one very specific question from Emily. What was the name of the author in the Financial Times that you
Oh,
recommended?
well, she has a column and she writes elsewhere and she's written some fabulous books, particularly about women in business. Dr. Margaret Heffernan.